Good afternoon, dear colleagues and guests. Today is the 8th of September 2021. It's 3 p.m. Moscow time. Let me declare open a session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of Thesis by Minina Darya A for the degree of Candidate of Pedagogics, Academic Specialty 13-0002, Theory and Methods of Training and Education, Russian as a Foreign Language, Level of Professional Education. On the theme, Formation of Communicative Competence of Foreign Military Servicemen in Everyday Military Communication Domain, Level B1. The Order of Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University, Gniotov Alexander Valentinovich, dated the 17th of May 2021, number 4893/1, appointed me, Galaktionova Tatiana Gelievna, Doctor of Pedagogics, Professor of the Department of Pedagogics at St. Petersburg University, Chairman of this Dissertation Council. Other members of the Council were appointed with the same order. Let me introduce them to you. Tarnaeva Larissa Petrovna, Doctor of Pedagogics, Associate Professor, Professor of the Department of Foreign Languages and Didactics of St. Petersburg University. Fedotova Nina Leonidovna, Doctor of Pedagogics, Professor, Professor of the Department of Russian as a Foreign Language and Teaching Methodology of St. Petersburg University. Vasilieva Galina Mikhailovna, Doctor of Philology, Professor, Professor of the Department of Intercultural Communications of Herzen State Pedagogical University of Russia. In the remote access mode, we have at this session Klobukova Lyubov Pavlovna, Doctor of Pedagogics, Professor, Head of the Department of Russian for Foreign Students of Humanities of Moscow State University, named after Lomonosov. Dear Lyubov Pavlovna, can you see and hear us? The answer is yes. Arshansky Yevgeny Yakovlevich, Doctor of Pedagogics, Professor, Vice Rector for Research of Vitebsk State University, named after Masharov, Belarus. Dear Yevgeny Yakovlevich, can you see and hear us? Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you very much. The answer is positive. Dear colleagues, let me ask Fedotova Nina Leonidovna to take part in because I have some voice issues. Dear Nina Leonidovna. Also at the session, the supervisor of the applicant, Moscovin Leonid Viktorovich, Doctor of Pedagogics, Professor, Department of Russian as a Foreign Language and Teaching Methodology of St. Petersburg University, Professor. In order to improve the quality of communication, dear colleagues working in the remote access mode, please switch off your microphones. But please remember to turn them on when you are given the floor. Let me also inform you that our session is being recorded and broadcast online at St. Petersburg University website. The speeches are being simultaneously translated from Russian into English and from English into Russian. On the screen of the live broadcast of the Dissertation Council session, an email is currently displayed to which all the attendees can send questions to the applicant and express their opinion regarding the content of the thesis and the applicant's speech, the current scientific discussion, and take part in the discussion. These questions shall be forwarded to me by our technical support department, and I shall present them during the discussion. Questions should be related strictly to the applicant's speech and the content of her thesis. it's necessary to indicate full name, position, and place of employment of the author. Questions that are not related to the scientific discussion of the thesis, its text, and assessment of the thesis, as well as anonymous questions, shall not be presented. In accordance with the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, degree of Candidate of Sciences and Doctor of Sciences, approved by the local regulations, hereinafter referred to as the order, a session of the Dissertation Council shall be considered competent if at least 2/3 of the approved members are present, but not less than 4 persons. Our Dissertation Council consists of 6 persons. All 6 are present, including 2 council members in the remote interactive mode. Audio-visual contact has been established with them. Thus, we have the quorum. Let me set forth the following procedure of today's session of the Dissertation Council, with the approximate duration of approximately 2 hours. First, summary information of the chairman about the applicant and documents submitted by the applicant and their compliance. Answers to possible questions, approximately 5 minutes. Summary report of the applicant outlining the key points of her research, approximately 15 minutes. Questions to the applicant strictly on her report, not more than 2 minutes for each question. Answers of the applicant, not more than 5 minutes for all questions. Speeches of all the council members in turn, with their assessment of the thesis and the applicant's speech, as well as questions and suggestions to the applicant. Approximately 10 minutes for each speaker. 10. Speech of the chairman with her assessment of the thesis. Approximately 10 minutes. 7. Answers of the degree applicant to questions and remarks of the council members, not more than 20 minutes. Open discussion. Speeches at will of the attendees with summaries of their opinions and/or specific questions and suggestions to the applicant strictly on the theme of this study, no more than 2 minutes for each speaker. At that, all these speakers are kindly requested to register themselves and introduce themselves before speaking. 9. Presentation of questions to the applicant received during the discussion in live broadcast of the Dissertation Council session at the Petersburg University website. Please note that written questions, a reading of which shall take over 2 minutes, shall not be presented. 10. Answers of the applicant, no more than 2 minutes for each question. 11. Speech of the academic supervisor, not more than 3 minutes. Discussion of the council members before open voting of the defense results. For that period, live broadcast sound shall be muted. Approximately 5 minutes. 13. Open individual voting. Votes shall be counted by the chairman and the results shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. 14. Making decision on awarding or non-awarding the degree. And 15. Closing remarks of the applicant, no more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or objections to this procedure? If there are no objections, let's start the procedure. First, let me ask you to switch off your mobile phones. Dear colleagues, dear fellow council members working in the remote access mode, please do not switch your phones so that we could contact you in case of emergency if there is some technical failure. Thank you for your understanding. Let's start our session. The first item is the chairman's summary of our chairman. Well, the documents. of Darya Anatolievna, and the thesis by Minina Darya Anatolievna for the degree of candidate of pedagogics, academic specialty 130002, theory and methods of training and education, Russian as a foreign language, level of professional education, on the theme formation of communicative competence of foreign military servicemen in everyday military communication domain, level B1. Was accepted for defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University on the 16th of April 2021, number 3570/1. Minina Darya Anatolievna wrote her thesis at St. Petersburg University under supervision of Moskovkin Leonid Viktorovich, Doctor of Pedagogics, Professor of the Department of Russian Language as Foreign Language and its teaching methods of St. Petersburg University. Number of publications which set forth the main results according to the enclosed list is 4. In peer-reviewed publications from the list approved by the Ministry of Science and Education of Russian Federation, 4 publications. In journals indexed in the scientometric databases Web of Science and Scopus, no publications. The applicant submitted to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University a full set of documents for acceptance of the thesis for consideration if all documents comply with Article 12 of the order. All the documents submitted by the applicant, according to the information I received from the curator, comply with the regulations and are kept in the applicant's attestation file. Copies are available from the Dissertation Council Activity Support Department officer who is now present. Before I give the floor to the applicant, I have a question to the council members. Dear council members, do you have any general questions to the applicant? And is it necessary to disclose the entire list of documents submitted by the applicant? There are no questions. Dear Darya Anatolievna, the floor is yours. Let me remind you that you will have 15 minutes at your disposal. Please turn the microphone on. Is this better? Dear Chairman of the Dissertation Council, dear Council members, here's a thesis on the, you may see the topic here. The sphere of everyday military communication is one of the most important for foreign cadets and students of Russian military universities, which is constantly emphasized by the Russian officers, tutors working with them. At the same time, Russian language teachers do not traditionally teach everyday military communication, believing that cadets and students will be able to master the necessary skills on their own outside class time. As a consequence, there are constant difficulties in the process of communication, both with native speakers of Russian, employees of Russian military universities and Russian cadets, as well as with servicemen of other nationalities. The need for scientific solution to the problem of developing communicative competence in everyday military communication and the lack of study of this problem were the factors that contributed to the relevance of our work. The object of the study is the process of formation of communicative competence of foreign military personnel in the sphere of everyday communication. The subject is formation of this competence on the basis of lexical minimum in the sphere of everyday communication. Hypothesis of this study is that the process of forming the communicative competence in the sphere of everyday communication will be effective if the work programs will allocate teaching hours for communication in the sphere, training materials created on the basis of situational and lexical minimums in the sphere of communication will be used in language classes. The aim of the study is to develop a methodology for developing communicative competence in everyday military communication. The main results of the study are as follows. In the sphere of everyday military communication, a special sphere of communication for military personnel has been identified and described. including the of military education, is characterized by extra linguistic factors, daily situations combined with official situations, and the need for standardized speech. Made a list of speech situations. There are situations regulated by documents such as military salute, morning and evening activities, as well as speech situations forecast on the basis of these documents. Also, we developed so the situations we are learning the general communicative competence that require extra lexical units. For example, my day is enlarged to daily routine with appropriate language units, as well as situations that occur only in everyday military communication, such as a report on arrival. We identified speech situations that cause greatest difficulties in foreign cadets. We also, as a result, we described communicative competence of foreign military personnel in everyday military communication. This competence includes special communicative competence in everyday communication. It depends on, because of communication is verbal, and two stylistic registers, standardized language and spoken language. Mastering these competencies in everyday military communication means using both style registers appropriately. This slide demonstrates a scheme of communicative competence of military servicemen, the daily communication, professional military communication. Also, we made a lexical of everyday military communication, which includes units needed for adequate communication in typical communicative situations in this sphere. This lexical minimum includes several groups of words. Words included in B1 level make up 40%, and they require additional verbs of movement, be responsible, and others also need, for example, such as civilian is not what belongs to something that belongs to a cinema, but as an antonym to military. A lamp, and be responsible to respond to somebody for something, including journal, head of the national group, as in informing, airing, washing. Also, the lexical minimum includes rare words that are necessary in everyday communicative situations, such as clothing items and words connected with documents, such as migration card, fill in, extend, etc. So lexic included is from the 32% of the total official language. Submit a report through somebody, timely arrival, unlawful absence. As a result, this lexical minimum of everyday military communication included 300 units, 165 nouns, 50 adjectives, 80 verbs, and 5 adverbs. Also, on the basis of this situational and vocabulary minimums, we develop training materials, including methodological tools. The principles we may see in this slide. We defined the order of training activities, searching for answers, discussion of problem issues, discussion of situations, working with clusters of new lexical units, doing language exercises, working with instructions to identify the necessary actions, role plays, and tasks for extracurriculum activities. Parameters for us. So we conducted some experiments. Parameters for assessment of communicative competence. We assessed understanding of communicative task, adequate solution of and the use of stylistic register, following grammar and military etiquette rules. We conducted resulting experiment where assessment was made with the help of this criteria. In the beginning, they demonstrated approximately equal results. And during the control experiment, the difference in assessment amounted to 20%. Thus, the following provisions are submitted for defense. There's a special sphere of communication of foreign military personnel that's not available to foreign students in civilian universities, the sphere of everyday military communication, which is characterized by both speech situations strictly regulated by normative documents and speech situations predicted on the basis of these documents. In Russian language classes at military higher education institutions, it's necessary to teach FMP to communicate in this sphere, take into account these speech situations. Second provision. Communicative competence of foreign military personnel includes specific communicative competence in the area of everyday military communication. Its specific features is due first to the oral nature of communication and second to the need to master 2 stylistic registers, the standardized language of military manuals and instructions, and spoken language. To master communicative competence in everyday military communication means to be able to use both stylistic registers appropriately for the situation. Provision 3. The principles of selection of the lexical minimum in the field of everyday communication of foreign military personnel are the principles of situational and thematic relevance of a lexical unit, the principle of reliance on oral sources, the principle of compliance of the lexical minimum, its recommended volume, and the principle of degree or difficulty, ease of mastering a lexical unit. A lexical minute in the area of everyday military communication of 300 lexical units ensures mastery of communicative competence in the area of everyday military communication. Training materials created on the basis of the minimum vocabulary of everyday military communication serve as the basis for formation of communicative competence in this area. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Darya Anatolievna. Dear Council members, do you have any questions to the degree applicant strictly on her report outlining the key points of her study or the content of the thesis? Welcome. Please turn the sound on. Darya Anatolievna, please let us know how how communicative competence can include communicative competence. Communicative competence is a complex concept that includes several components, and these components depend on the sphere where the competence is used of the student. I mean, professional sphere has a great impact on that, and the communicative competence of a foreign military personnel cannot completely coincide with the communicative competence of a language student, for example. Can you please answer the question that I asked, how a communicative competence can include a special a communicative competence? Yes, it can. Is this your opinion? Yes, it is. That's your idea of a communicative competence. Yes. I understand, Nina Leonidovna, that we could continue this discussion. So the question was asked, and the answer that the applicant could give, dear colleagues, do you have more questions? Or shall we proceed to presentation of the reviews? Well, you have the opportunity to answer all the questions and remarks given after each review, or you can answer all the questions and remarks in the end. Could I answer all questions in the end? So your decision is to answer after all the reviews are presented. I see. Okay. I have to mention that we received no external reviews, and that means that we could proceed to presentation of the council member reviews. Dear colleagues, I have to inform you that since all the reviews were posted at St. Petersburg University website for preliminary review, I suggest that you read or present only the key points and questions and remarks to the applicant. So what you consider necessary to present at this moment. Do council members have any objections to that suggestion? No. No. I see. Very well. Council members have no objections, so let us proceed to reviews of the council members and chairman. Tarnaeva Larisa Petrovna, the floor is yours. You can hear me, right? The cooperation is growing between Russia and other states in the military sphere. The number of foreign military personnel, military cadets, is increasing, and because of that, the relevance, the issue of training methods is getting more relevant. And in that respect, there's no doubt that the theme is relevant. The study dedicated to the methodology of development of communicative competences in military personnel. I should say that the author is one of the very few researchers who decided to take up this subject. The methodology of teaching Russian as a foreign language, this issue has not been adequately described. I can talk a lot about the advantages and the strong points of the thesis. I actually liked it very much, so let me focus on the key points which I consider very successful. It seems to me that the wealth of empirical material is one of the advantages of this work. The author collected considerable material, and this material covers the sphere of daily military communication and includes authentic dialogues of military, foreign servicemen and Russian officers or civilian staff. And many authentic dialogues were recorded, on the basis of which 14 educational dialogues were compiled, which seem interesting to me. Moreover, when creating these training dialogues, the author used normative documents. So it seems to me that these educational dialogues, because such a wealth of empirical material, these dialogues are getting the very authentic nature. And if we differentiate between authenticity, the different types of authenticity, I can say that these training dialogues have methodological authenticity. Special significance is that the lexical minimum suggested by the author for creation of communicative competence is the first attempt to create a corpus of lexical units necessary for military personnel communication. And the author emphasizes that this competence is oral, and that is why the process of this with different types of speech activities, but the priority is given to auditory and spoken activities. But at the same time, the author has used some written documents which seem to be very appropriate to me. It also looks appropriate to me that among the methods the emphasis is put on working on the lexical component, because development of this component of communicative competence involves formation of lexical skills, working with inner and outer. Special attention is paid to communicative exercises such as role plays and task solving. The use of task solving, of problem solving tasks, seems to be an advantage. So let me proceed to general characteristic. So I will drop, because the reviews were published at the website. In general, the hypothesis can be tested and proven. Novelty, theoretical and practical significance. The presentation complies with the requirements applied to such works. The structure is logical and outlines the results of the study. Especially, I would like to mention good logic and organization of the in presentation of the results. Maybe there is that results from professional environment where the experiment was conducted, and the very topic of the study and impact of the population of subjects. So in the beginning, from the beginning we have how logical the thesis. So maybe the author has been working in this sphere for a long time. So maybe she learned this manner from her subjects. So well, also let me add that the author has mastered professional vocabulary, and as in every work, you always get questions or requests for clarification, or maybe some recommendations which represent my personal opinion. So let me present. For example, I have a question. Here's my question. Senator, the ratio between language, communicative exercises. Maybe I missed that, but I think there was no emphasis, because communicative competence is the aim is to create communicative competence. So what's the relation, what's the ratio of the between the number of different exercises? Also, there's another question related to that. Creating a set of skills, creation of set of skills. Exactly what skills are you trying to develop? And from the language point, it seemed to me it was necessary to list the scientific sources that characterize standardized register, and you're using these terms quite justly so, and you provided definitions, but this is scientific work, and it is necessary to rely on some sources. And maybe my main recommendation is that the lexical minimum includes 3 groups of words: common words with high frequency, low frequency words selected by subject and theme significance, and standardized vocabulary common in military personnel. But at that, the author claims that this lexical minimum should be used not on frequency vocabulary, but the corpus of dialogues based on authentic conversations and situations. Page 46. This statement appears doubtful to me, because, as I said, though this is a certain achievement, and the value of the work is in the rich empirical material, but yet it seems to me that it does not fully reflect the sphere of everyday communication, because it does not include such a group of military words as military slang. I was interested in this work, and foreign military personnel, they want to communicate also in field camps or joint activities, and of course they may find themselves, they may encounter, they may participate in informal communication with Russian military personnel, and there, of course, such slang will be used. So that it would be good to touch upon. I beg your pardon. How many minutes? So please finish. So the following the principle of minimization, when selecting training material, the author could have included certain number of slang words which do not have, which are not rude, of course, but maybe neutral, some neutral slang words. And for that, I have even recommended several dictionaries which are of such slang words, But in my opinion, the selection should include. But these remarks by no means affect the overall high assessment of the study and are mostly recommendations. And in conclusion, the author says that she does not exclude further review of the lexical minimum. So she understands, and I think in the future, in her work, you will get back, because you have already outlined such a prospect. So this thesis by Darya A Minima on the theme Communicative Competence of Foreign Military Servicemen in the city of Delhi, level B1, corresponds to the main requirements set by the order of the 1st of September, number 6821/1, on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the degree applicant, Darya A Minina, deserves being awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogics, Specialty 130002, Theory and Methods of Speaking, of Teaching and Education, Russian language as a foreign language. Articles 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated. Larissa Petrovna, thank you. Dear Council members, please remember that we have to stick to the time limit up to 10 minutes. And let me give the floor to Nina Leonidovna Fedotova. Thank you very much. I will try to make it short. The thesis by Minina Darya Anatolievna attempts to address a relevant problem of training military servicemen, foreign servicemen. The author identified the sphere of everyday military communication and the advantages, the regulations, internal regulations conducted in order to master, included in oral and spoken skills of the students. On the basis of analysis of real situations of everyday communication, the applicant identified speech situations that she included in the situational minimum. The author made a list of speech situations typical for this sphere, describing communicative competence of foreign servicemen in everyday military communication, common for all the servicemen in military schools of Russia. Darya Anatolievna claims that this competence ensures oral communication includes two stylistic registers, standardized and spoken. The author made a lexical minimum for everyday military communication of foreign cadets. The conclusions of the thesis and education materials have practical significance. The experimental results may demonstrate contribution of the author dedicated to development of communicative competence of foreign military personnel in Russian universities. The main ideas of the thesis are valuable, and its methodological value. Let me clarify certain points. I have certain doubts about the hypothesis because the classroom time, especially in military schools, is done by the administration and not by the researcher. So there is a question if the method will work considering limited time. As the author says, her aim is to develop the method of formation of communicative competence, page 7. Yet the author focuses on formation of lexical skills necessary for daily communication of servicemen. What explains? How can such a shift be explained? The study includes description of exercises on communicative competence in everyday military communication of foreign military personnel, yet there is no classification of exercises considering specific features of this sphere. Also, the order of exercises is not explained. Number 4, though Darya Anatolyevna speaks about the need to link teaching different types of speech activity, daily routine, about half of exercises are lexical and other tasks cannot be used to develop skills such as dialogues read by the teacher. Reading texts, there are no pretexts when preparing for dialogue practice. 5. A question: while when developing the method of teaching foreign servicemen, foreign educational methods are not used. This sphere in methodology is considered important. 6. There are some style and grammar mistakes. These questions and remarks have no impact on the overall positive assessment of Darya Anatolyevna Minina's work. I think her thesis is a complete paper and has scientific novelty in its sphere. The thesis by Minina Darya Anatolyevna on the theme Formation of Communicative Competence of Foreign Servicemen in the Sphere of Daily Military Communication, level B1, corresponds to the main requirements set by the order of the 1st of September 2016, number 6821/1, on the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the applicant deserves being awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogics, Specialty 130002, Theory and Method of Teaching and Education, Russian as at the level of professional education. Article 11 of the above mentioned has not been violated. Thank you for your attention. Dear Nina Leonidovna, thank you very much for your review. Now let me give the floor to Vasilieva Galina Mikhailovna. Thank you. I will also try to shorten my review because many points are similar to what was said by my colleagues. Relevance of the work is obvious because the number of foreign military personnel at our universities is increasing. So what Larissa Petrovna said is that the number of foreign military personnel is increasing. Maybe because our education is high quality. So the relevance of developing methods and materials for teaching military personnel is relevant. So Darya Anatolyevna was very successful in selecting this sphere because we don't have this system for building communicative competence in everyday military communication. So the topic is highly relevant, and it's obvious that the author was very involved. I would like to say that, of course, this thesis has relevance and scientific novelty and practical significance. And what seems important to me is such massive empirical work conducted by the author, on the basis of which she identified spheres of communication of servicemen and typical speech situations typical for this sphere. Moreover, all these surveys helped the author to create this lexical minimum, which I consider to be the greatest success of the work, because this is very valuable material for teaching foreign servicemen. And I mentioned that in my review that this is massive, this work was massive, which demonstrates authenticity of the results. And as I said already, the work, I have a positive, I gave positive assessment to the work, and though it's interesting and it's a success, I got some questions which are not connected with provisions submitted for defense, but are points for discussion. First, the author mentions in the sphere the existence of two registers, standardized and spoken. But if we talk about the spoken register or discourse, we are in the realm of spoken speech, which has multi-aspect linguistic characteristics. What characteristics of spoken speech, besides lexical, according to the author, are relevant for the linguistic component of communicative competence in the sphere of daily spoken military communication? This is my first question. Second question. Since the author, among the participants of communication, included not only cadets but also officers, for example, officer and cadet, cadet and cadet, in our opinion, the author should pay attention to some registers which are especially relevant for communicative competence of servicemen, for example, subordination, vertical, and equal, horizontal, that have different characteristics, not only in regulated but in daily communication. 3. The advantage of the work. So I got some questions about its use and development. My first question is about the term, the title of paragraph 1.3 is, she uses the title Lexical Minimum, yet on page 44 she says that the lexical minimum is presented in 3 forms, as a theme list, thematic list. So the theme list is one of the types of presentation of lexical minimum, yet on many pages of the work the author speaks about situational and lexical minimum. That means that situational lexical minimums are seen as parallel or equal structures. So here I'd like to clarify if the concept of situational minimum and thematic minimum, are these synonyms? If not, what is the difference between the two, and what's the relation between the lexical minimum and situational minimum? Two types of parallel. The second question is connected with development of the lexical minimum with lexical minimum of general acquisition and concepts of special and common vocabulary. Has the author only used special vocabulary or common vocabulary as well? So what was excluded? These questions I got because of the example of lexical minimum in daily routine, pages 44-45. The author explained that it contains only 60 words, 20 of which are included in the common lexical minimum and remaining 40. So the majority of words from the list, according to the author, are typical only for daily military communication. This conclusion is doubtful because such as personal activity, physical exercise, or airing are typical not only for daily military communication, but maybe they are not very frequent. Though, of course, the author speaks about low-frequency vocabulary, talking about the minimum in general, not explaining its relation to the general minimum. And the final, because the lexical minimum is a tool for building communicative competence, what methods of using the lexical minimum, developing the were most efficient. As I said already, these questions were set forth as points for discussion and do not affect the assessment of the thesis. Thus, this study is an independent scientific qualification work. Is dedicated to formation of communicative competence of foreign servicemen in everyday military communication. I beg your pardon. The thesis by Darya Anatolievna Minina on the theme formation of communicative competence of foreign military servicemen in everyday military communication corresponds to the main requirements set forth by the order the 1st of September 2016 on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and the applicant deserves being awarded the degree of candidate of pedagogics, 1300 theory and methods of training and education. Russian is a foreign language. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated. Thank you for your attention. Dear Galina Mikhailovna, thank you for your speech and for your review. Let's proceed to the next speaker. Let's give the floor to Klobukova Lyubov Pavlovna. Lyubov Pavlovna, the floor is yours. Thank you. Dear Chairman of the Council, dear colleagues, the thesis by Darya Anatolievna Minina is dedicated to foreign servicemen in Russian University of Communicative Competence in the sphere of everyday communication. Relevance has already been mentioned. Relevance of this work is explained by significance of the sphere of everyday sphere for all servicemen, including foreign cadets, officers, Russian universities. During their training, they have to behave as required in the internal regulations and military regulations, and at the same time these regulations regulate not only behavior but also the use of certain vocabulary. This explains the need to develop this communicative competence. At the same time, it's well demonstrated by the author. Daily communication has not been until today and has never been an object of focused study, and this sphere has not been well described or interpreted from the point of language didactics. So that's very important. Considering this factor, Darya Anatolievna addressed the following tasks: the study of professional communication, including typical speech situations. This is very important. The study of specific features of communicative competence of military servicemen, and creating a relevant linguistic minimum. The author developed and tested teaching materials. All these tasks the author managed to accomplish. Darya Anatolievna studied relevant communication spheres and speech needs of foreign servicemen. This helped her to identify specific sphere of specific. Also, let me say that selection and description of typical speech situations in this sphere was conducted on the basis of own observations, as well as questionnaires sent analysis of internal military regulations and internal documents based on these regulations. The study of everyday communication enabled the author to describe two types of speech communications relevant for teaching. These include, first, speech behavior controlled by military regulations and other documents. And second group of situations, these are situations that can be forecast on the basis of these regulations. Also, the author identified most difficult communicative situations. It's always very important for educators, and they were put in 7 groups. So that's an important point. And analyzing communicative situations, foreign military servicemen, the author identified linguistic features and assessed it as a station communicative task adequate solution, observing the norms of speech etiquette, use of adequate style register, and grammar norms. Special attention should be paid to development of a linguistic minimum. This has already been discussed. The author, such as adequacy, stage, time limit, number of classroom hours, and difficulty. So all this enabled the author to set forth the linguistic minimum of 300 units that are difficult. Here, let me mention that the difference between this linguistic minimum is only based on oral speech. The author developed a system of exercises and tasks to teach military servicemen daily communications, and this system of exercises and tasks has been tested in the course of pedagogical experiment. This is also very important. Let me emphasize high degree of validity of scientific provisions made by the author. They are either confirmed with the works of leading experts or based on own research conducted by the author. Also, let me mention the theoretical significance, which is explained by several factors, including results of the study of everyday communication, typical speech situations. It's very important. We have not had it before. A study of as well as results on lexical minimum and its principles. Besides, the theoretical provisions can be used in teaching. So these materials, we have not. As for validity of the study, the validity is ensured not only by the use of scientific methods appropriate to her tasks and results of the experimental tests conducted by the author. And of course, this study has great practical significance, that is obvious. The results can be used in military universities, of different types of military universities, the use of training materials in the lexical minimum, and at the same time, despite the high assessment as well as other reviewers, let me make some critical remarks. I mentioned already that the author identified situations of every day, so she identified most difficult situation and speech units to be used in these difficult situations. It seems to me that it would be appropriate to describe all speech situations, not only the difficult ones. And besides, there are some style errors. So in conclusion, Let me say that these remarks do not affect the high assessment and should be seen as recommendations for future research. I have no doubt that the author will continue in this sphere, and indeed the key provisions set forth in 8 articles. And in conclusion, let me say that the thesis by Minina Darya Anatolievna for the degree of candidate of pedagogics is a complete study that corresponds to all the requirements applied to such works. And of course, it corresponds to specialty 13002, Theory and Methods of Training Education, Russian as a Foreign Language. Thank you for your attention. Dear Lyubov Pavlovna, thank you for your speech and review. Dear Evgeny Yakovlevich, we can see you very well, and hopefully that the distance between us will not prevent you from taking part in our scientific discussion, the discussion of the thesis. On our side, let us ensure you that we very much appreciate your presence and your input, and we are very happy to give the floor to you. Arshansky Evgeny Yakovlevich, dear colleagues, can you hear me well? Yes, dear colleagues. Good afternoon. I am glad to participate in the work of your dissertation council once again, and in the discussion of Darya Anatolievna Minina's thesis. As for the review, let me say the following. The thesis by Minina Darya Anatolievna is dedicated to teaching Russian as a foreign language at Russian military universities. The author looks at the concept of teaching foreign military personnel everyday military communication. It's impossible not to agree with the thesis that the sphere of daily communication is very important for foreign cadets and officers in Russian universities. It has not been studied, and material for development of communicative competence are non-existent. This which results in pedagogical contradiction, which the author addressed in her work. Darya Anatolievna starts her work with a study of the sphere of everyday daily communication. She relies on the works of Skalkin, Vishnyakova, Klobukova, and other authors. She studies typical situations of daily military communication. She uses observation, surveying, personnel, and analysis of documents that regulate daily behavior of servicemen. Then the author identifies situations described in these documents and situations that can be forecast. Definition of situations that are difficult for foreign cadets. The author put them in 7 theme groups. Because the goal of this study is not only to develop the method of creating communicative competence, the author explores the concept of communicative competence in this sphere. Here there are 2 registers of communication, official and informal, that require each unique approaches and assessment of this competence. Parameters for competence assessment in the sphere of daily communication, according to the author, is understanding of communicative task, adequate solution to this task, the use of style register of everyday military communication, observation of grammar rules and military etiquette. Special significance for training is the work to create the minimum daily military communication. The author identifies several principles for this minimum that can determine its content and based on dialects in different speech situations. This minimum includes 300 words used in exercises. The author described the main components of her method in the sphere of daily military communication, goals, content, and methods. Besides, she described the methodological principles such as communication, appropriateness, situational and lexical minimum, and theme organization. Training material include 7 tasks, which include methodology and recommended exercises, logical and text based on the regulatory document and test questions. These education materials have been tested and their efficiency has been proved. Scientific novelty of the thesis is in the fact that the author described daily military communication of foreign servicemen, described specific features of communicative competence in this sphere, made a minimum of lexical units for this sphere, developed and tested training materials based on this minimum. All the provisions of the thesis are well argumented, and validity of the results is beyond any doubt. Theoretical significance lies in development on classification of typical speech situations of daily military communication, in determining specific feature of communicative competence in this sphere, development of principles of lexical minimum. The study has practical significance because lexical material in the thesis can become the basis for development of communicative competence of foreign servicemen in military universities. The theoretical provisions of the thesis can be used in teaching methodology of Russian language, as Russian foreign language is an independent, complete study that made a contribution in teaching Russian as a foreign language. Authors' publications, 4 of which published in journals recommended by National Attestation Committee, outlined the key results. Thus, the thesis by Minina, Darya A, formation of communicative foreign military servicemen in the sphere of everyday military communication, level B1, corresponds to the main requirements set by the order of the 1st of September 2016 6821/1 on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the degree applicant, Minina Darya A, deserves being awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogics, Specialty 130002, Theory and Methodology of Teaching and Training Russian as a Foreign Language, Professional Education. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated, and so signed by Council Member, Dr. Professor Arshansky Evgeny Yakovlevich. Dear colleagues, thank you for your attention. Dear Evgeny Yakovlevich, thank you very much for your review. Let us continue our session. Dear colleagues, let me present my review to the thesis. In speeches of all the council members, they all mentioned relevance of this study, and I absolutely agree with these opinions. And let me add that improvement of training methods of foreign servicemen is an obligatory condition for exporting Russian military higher education. One of the quality criteria for training military servicemen is the communicative competence, and of course they are in a situation of daily military communication, and we may guess that communicative challenges of these lives are quite significant for them, both personally and professionally. Relevance of the topic is explained by the pedagogical contradiction between the need to develop a communicative competence or in daily military communication and absence of method for its development and appropriate educational material. The work focuses on the methodological solution to this contradiction and efficient ways to create this communicative competence. If we talk about the validity of scientific provisions and conclusions and recommendations made by the author, let me focus on the following. Scientific provisions. The author claims there are specific features of everyday military communication and the need to teach servicemen communication in this sphere. The characteristics of communicative competence. Principles for selection and the volume of linguistical minimum, approach to developing teaching materials. Scientific provisions made by the author are well evidenced. Their validity is sufficient. The author made reference to other researchers or her own study. The author has studied such methods as observation of speech behavior of military personnel, oral and written surveys, recording and modeling of speech stations of everyday communication, content analysis of military regulations, and experimental test of the method of creation of communicative competence. On the basis of theoretical analysis, scientific literature, the author, and reviewing the results of her own study, the author made conclusion on specific features of military educational environment, on methods of assessment of communicative skills, and significance of all the principles are needed to create the lexical minimum. Following the results of her experiments, the author concludes that the educational materials are efficient. Speaking of validity and novelty of scientific provisions, it's necessary to say that validity of the results of the study is explained by the theoretical and methodological validity of the provisions, the use of teaching methods adequate to her tasks. Novelty of the study depends on a number of points: methodological research and instrumental nature, for the first time suggested by the author as scientific text, and other publications. The most relevant component of scientific novelty is the description of the sphere of everyday military communication, characteristic of everyday military communication, and the use of principles in designing the educational material. The thesis makes a contribution to the theory and method of teaching Russian as a foreign language in professional education. If we talk about the theoretical significance, the work contains certain theoretical prerequisites for further study of communicative competence formation. Besides, the author describes significant for pedagogics ideas of classification of typical situations in everyday military communication, the communicative competence in this sphere, and principles of creating the lexical minimum. Practical significance of the thesis As I have already, as it was already mentioned by my colleagues, is in the lexical minimum and the educational materials that can be used to create the develop the communicative competence in military universities, of different types. The theoretical provisions can be used in teaching methods of teaching Russian as a foreign language. The practical significance for students, including doctoral students, is the list of literature. And if we talk about the content of the study and publications, it's necessary to say that this content is well reflected in 8 articles, 4 of which were published in journals recommended by the National Attestation Commission. Let me give some considerations that the author may take into consideration, may consider for her future work. Most of my comments and remarks have already been mentioned by my colleagues. Among other things, as well as Nina Leonidovna, I am a little bit concerned with the first hypothesis that the process of building communicative competence in everyday communication in foreign servicemen will be efficient if classroom hours are dedicated to teaching communication in this sphere. As it seems to me, this condition is of organizational nature, not of scientific nature. The second provision says that the communicative competence of foreign military personnel includes special communicative competence in everyday military communication. But as we have already seen, this wording is unlucky, and I would like to clarify if the second competence is an independent result or a local manifestation of general communicative competence. And finally, the final question and comment is that, as it seems to me, it's not obvious that a scientific component of the third provision, lexical minimum, in the sphere of military communication includes 30 lexical units, guarantees mastering communicative competence in everyday. So my question is, does that mean that the author advocates with this wording this number of lexical units, or is the author talking about some other new scientific knowledge obtained in the course of the study? These considerations and questions do not affect relevance of the study. And in conclusion, let me say that the analysis of the work enables me to say that the study of Minina Darya A in formation of communicative competence of foreign military servicemen in everyday military communication level B2 corresponds to the main requirements set by the order on the 1st of September 2016, 6821/1, on the order of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And the applicant, Minina Darya, deserves being awarded the degree of Candidate of Pedagogics, Specialty 130002, Theory and Methods of Training, Education, Russian as a Foreign Language, Level of Professional Education. Article 11 of the above-mentioned order has not been violated by the author. Thank you. And now, after all the reviews, is anyone present here who is not a member of the Dissertation Council willing to speak? we have not received any questions during the session. So, dear colleagues, let's give the floor to the applicant and let her answer the questions. Is it on? Dear council members, thank you for your interest in my work, for your remarks, questions and suggestions, and let me answer them. And I grouped your questions by theme. Nina Leonidovna and Tatiana Gelievna expressed doubts about the validity of indicating the temporal factor in the text of hypothesis. They say that it's more of organizational rather than methodological aspect of the study, including the hypothesis of provision on the need to allocate classroom hours to formation of communicative competence in the sphere of everyday middle communication. We proceeded from the provision of the theory of learning optimization of Yuri Konstantinovich Babansky, who proved that learning conditions and time allocating the teaching of this or that material is the most important factor that ensures the effectiveness of learning. This was also mentioned by Joseph Whitlin in his monograph Adult Foreign Language Training. In this connection, we believe that allocation of classroom hours is not the function of the university. The university usually indicates the number of hours, and the distribution of these hours is carried out in by the faculty. Nina Leonidovna mentions that our attention to formation of lexical skills leads to a certain bias because the aim of the study was to develop a method of building communicative competence. In the process of research, we proceeded from the fundamental position of Yefim Israeli Shpasov that all speech skills are formed only when speaking. Formation of any speech skill is a natural component of formation development of speech skills. We chose lexical skills because the linguistic specificity in the sphere of everyday military communication manifests itself mainly in the sphere of vocabulary. Tatiana Gelievna's review has a question. Communicative competence in the sphere of everyday military communication is an independent educational result or a local manifestation of the general communicative competence. Communicative competence in everyday military communication is part of communicative competence of foreign military personnel. It's closely connected with educational, professional, domestic, and cultural. This connection is manifested primarily in phonetic and grammatical aspects. The differences are manifested mainly in the field of vocabulary. Larissa Petrovna would like me to specify specific skills and abilities cadets acquire during their training. What particular skills and abilities included in the composition of the named competence? The Thesis investigates the skills of oral communication, listening and speaking, the ability to understand information from spoken messages, and ability to initiate a dialogue to solve the communicative task. Galina Mikhailovna asked what characteristics of spoken language are relevant to linguistic component. The speech of military personnel has the same characteristics as speech of civilians: expressiveness, ellipticity, situationality, etc. Larissa Petrovna asks us to specify scientific sources we use to characterize the concept of standardized register and colloquial register. We relied on Galina Alexandrovna Zolotova's work, Communicative Grammar of the Russian Language, which uses the concept of communicative register. Tatiana Gelievna asked about the lexical minimum. What is defended in the thesis? The number of lexical union or new scientific knowledge obtained as a result of the study. Our lexical minimum, like all other lexical minima, is a set of lexical units selected for a particular task. We recommend to build this communicative competence in the sphere of everyday communication, 300 units. This minimal sufficient number to implement the goals set in the thesis, but this is only a recommendation. In other time contexts, the number could be higher or lower. So the qualitative characteristics are more important. Thematic and relevance of words and connection with speech situation and needs of the students. Besides, Valery Moskovkin recommended to review lexical minima every 5 years. So maybe the number will be different. Galina Mikhailovna asks, what are the relations between the concepts situational minimum, thematic minimum, lexical minimum, generic or parallel? The relations between minima are diverse. On the one hand, speech situation are often grouped according to theme, such classification relations. On the other hand, speech situations lexical minimum oral speech, cause and effect relations. And finally, it's possible to distinguish lexical thematic groups within, as in the famous dictionary, lexical basis of the Russian language. Marina Petrovna asks to specify what's the ratio of linguistic, conditionally communicative and communicative exercises in this system of proposed methodological techniques, and what kind of communicative exercises were used, except for the mentioned role plays and problem tasks. In developing the system, we were guided by ratios suggested by Artyom Arutyunov. There should be more conditional communicative exercises than linguistic ones. Nina, in our work, we provide extra exercises that can be used to continue work, communicative exercises, so that in real life cadets could use their knowledge. Nina Leonidovna asked why we don't use ICT, such as electronic dictionaries, video recordings, presentations. We prepare a presentation for each training session. As for internet resources, the internet is not used in Russian military schools. We agree with the rest of comments and will take them into consideration in our further work. We thank Lyubov Pavlovna to describe all the identified speech situations. This was not the task of this study, and we limited ourselves to a brief description. In the future, we will definitely make a more in-depth description. We thank Evgeny Yakovlevich for pointing out that the most important aspects of our work from the point of theory and methodology of education. It's very important for for my future research into the sphere of everyday communication, information communicative skills. Once again, let me sincerely thank all the members of the Dissertation Council for your comments, suggestions, and questions. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues, dear council members. Are you all satisfied with Darya Anatolievna's answers? I think the answer is yes. Thank you. Now is the time I have one comment about Darya Anatolievna's quote by Pasov about the need to form speech skills. Of course, nobody can argue with that statement that the skills are perfected by speech. My question was connected with something different. You did not understand my question. Why only lexical skills are formed? Why outside the communicative competence you forgot about grammar and phonetic skills? So the lexical units are not connected outside the context. Thank you. So let me clarify. This is only a remark. I don't expect an answer. Thank you for this remark. Dear colleagues, do we have more remarks or questions or comments? Let me clarify about my comment about the number of words. For me, it would be important that you outlined the principles of selection, because you only included your definition only included the number but omitted the principles. But maybe you could consider that in the future. Yes, Larissa Petrovna. Galina Mikhailovna, I have a small comment, addition. You explained very well what's a theme minimum, situational minimum, lexical minimum. Yes, I am familiar with these concepts, but I had a question why you have used them as synonyms or as words with different meaning. My question was not about what these are, but why you make no difference between them. But I understood what you meant, so so this is not. So, but now I understood what you meant. Thank you. Thank you. Very well, dear colleagues. Am I right in thinking that we can move forward? No. So, dear colleagues, I understand our colleagues working in remote mode have no objections. Let me once again mention the opportunity for the attendees to speak. Of those who are not members of the Dissertation Council, so nobody is willing to speak. Then let us proceed to the speech of the academic supervisor, Leonid Viktorovich. Please tell us about the applicant and her work. Dear colleagues, I won't read my entire review, also published at the website. Let me mention the most important points, in my opinion. When Darya Anatolievna became my student, I asked her one question. If there is something unique in what you are doing that nobody else is doing, and then Darya Anatolievna said, yes, military communication, and she brought me situations, recorded dialogues, and then I asked her another question. Do you understand that you identified a specific sphere of communication? Darya Anatolievna said, yes, I understand. But I think the understanding came later, because after some years, indeed, she understood that this is a small discovery. Nobody has worked on that. And when Darya Anatolievna understood that, she started working with this situation, and with lexical minima, she started to analyze the topics of these dialogues. And all that looked very interesting to me, because she analyzed in detail the internal regulations of the army. I have never came across any papers on teaching Russian as a foreign language. I never came across these things before. So this analysis, she analyzed vocabulary and communication. She analyzed communication rules and instructions, that on the basis of which different situations can be forecast. It looked very interesting to me, and of course the scope of tasks that Darya Anatolievna wanted to address is very wide, and in a single study it's impossible to address all these tasks. So some drawbacks, of course, are inevitable. Let me thank the council members for pointing them out. But the principle of priority. Darya Anatolievna wanted to be the first one in the study of lexical aspect and communicative aspect, and I always supported this desire, and I think the results are quite good here. As you understand, I spoke about the thesis, but I wanted to characterize Darya Anatolievna as a researcher. And now, after she has graduated, we may say that Darya Anatolievna is a qualified researcher. She can address tasks in the sphere of methodology, teaching Russian as a foreign language. She is creative, she is dedicated, she is very independent. Here we ran into many difficulties. Sometimes it was hard to persuade Darya Anatolievna of something, and such independence is good. That means that Darya Anatolievna has good scientific prospects. And what I liked is her in-depth knowledge of the object of the study, because Darya Anatolievna lives at the university. She knows all the nuances of teaching foreign servicemen, and that's an important factor that affected the quality of her work. And I have very high opinion, though I understand that there are many things that can be improved in the future, and maybe other researchers will do that. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your attention. Leonid Viktorovich, thank you for your speech. And now I have to ask the colleagues if anyone else is willing to, any one of the council members willing to speak. No. Dear colleagues, working in remote mode, let me ask one question. This is a very simple question. Please tell me, these foreign military servicemen, they come from what countries you came across in your experiments and in the course of your study? Thank you for this question. Unfortunately, I cannot answer this question because this is classified information. I beg your pardon. We don't have the right to disclose. They come from Africa and Asia. I see. Thank you. And during your speech and the discussion of Leonid Viktorovich's speech, one thought came to me. Maybe if your thesis and your pedagogical experience make a contribution to building such attitude in these foreign servicemen, where they preserve or they keep warm feelings about Russia and the time they spend in Russia, in military universities in Russia, and that lexical minimum plays a role in that will be a very significant contribution. But the most important thing is that this lexical minimum is used only in training situations for peaceful purposes. At that, I would like to finish this discussion. And as I see, we have not received any questions. We don't have any further questions. Let's finish this phase of our session. Dear colleagues, before we vote, let me ask the council members and the applicant if the council members or the applicant have any remarks or questions about the procedure of today's meeting. connected with working in the remote access mode. So, and here it's important to get that I get answers from all the members, all the participants working. They have no questions, no remarks. Dear council members, no remarks. Now let's move on to the next point, voting. After that, won't accept any further speeches. Now is 4:45 Moscow time. Dear colleagues, before we vote, we have the opportunity to take a break to discuss the results of defense results, and the sound shall be muted. Do you think we need such a break to discuss the results? No, we don't. We think we don't need a break? No, I see. Well, if we don't need to discuss the results, let's continue our session and let's proceed to voting. Each council member shall express his opinion individually and openly. Let me ask the curator of today's defense to provide me with a sign-up sheet of the members of the Dissertation Council present at the meeting. Since we decided not to take a break for discussion, well, let us continue our session, and the sound is on. The sound is on. Let me make sure that everything works properly, because the most important moment of our session has come. Dear council members, let's make sure we can hear and see each other. Thank you. I see your positive answers. So let now put the question of awarding to Minina Darya Anatolyevna the degree of Candidate of Pedagogics, Specialty 130002, Theory and Methodology of Education and Teaching Russian as a foreign language, professional education level, to open individual voting. Let me remind you that a decision of the Decision Council on awarding a degree shall be considered positive if more than a half, but not less than 3 members of the Dissertation Council present at the session voted for it, according to Article 23 of the Order. I will address each council member individually. Council member Tarnaeva Larisa Petrovna, your opinion? I am certainly for awarding the degree, and I think that Darya Anatolyevna deserves it fully. Thank you very much, Larisa Petrovna. Council member Fedotova Nina Leonidovna, your opinion? I am for. Thank you, Nina Leonidovna. Council member Vasilieva Galina Mikhailovna, I am for awarding the degree. Thank you. Council member Klobukova Lyubov Pavlovna, your opinion? I am for awarding. Thank you, Lyubov Pavlovna. Council member Archansky Yevgeny Yakovlevich, your opinion? I support. I vote for. Me, Council Chairman Galaktionova Tatiana Gilevna, my opinion is positive. I support awarding the degree. Now I have to count the votes according to the procedure and announce the results. So, dear council members and guests, let me inform you that out of 6 council members who voted. 6 council members voted for awarding the degree. No one voted against and nobody abstained. The decision to award to Minina Darya Anatolievna the degree of Candidate of Pedagogics, Specialty 130002, Theory and Methods of Training and Education, Russian as a Foreign Language, Level of Professional Education, has been made. Dear applicant, let me give the floor to you for your closing remarks. Dear council members, let me thank you for high assessment of my study. Also, I would like to thank my academic supervisor for his sincere help, professional help and support. It was a pleasure to work with you. Thank you very much, everybody. Dear Darya Anatolievna, we sincerely congratulate you on this occasion and on passing this serious and significant procedure. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I declare our session closed. Let me thank all of you for your participation. Please stop live broadcasting.